The Tennessee sheriff who inspired the Walking Tall movies has now been implicated in his wife's murder. It was long believed that Pauline Pusser, the wife of the legendary Tennessee sheriff Buford Pusser, was shot and killed in an ambush meant for her husband. But new evidence suggests that it was the late sheriff who killed his wife. In today's episode, we are going to take a look at the original story and then the new evidence so you can make up your own mind. Was this murder or no? So first and foremost, who was Buford Pusser? Well, he is one of the most legendary and controversial sheriffs in U.S. history. As sheriff, Pusser survived 7 stabbings and 8 shootings. He killed 2 people in the line of duty and destroyed over 100 stills during his virtual one-man war against moonshining and other vices along the Mississippi-Tennessee state line. His efforts have inspired several books, songs, movies, and a TV series. And he was only sheriff for 6 short years. Now today, we are just looking at the new evidence that recently surfaced regarding one of the most famous stories of his tenure as sheriff. This is the ambush that killed his wife and left him near dead. Now, if you want the entire life and times of Buford Pusser, you are in luck. I have a separate lengthy video that chronicles his life from start to finish. That will be in the description below. And it is super interesting. But in this video, we are just going to hit the highlights and we're going to focus on the new evidence regarding the death of his wife. So let's get to it. Buford Hayes Pusser was born in McNairy County, Tennessee on December 12th of 1937. Buford would grow to stand 6 feet 6 inches tall. He would wrestle for a bit and then enter the Marines before he returned home to follow in the footsteps of his father in law enforcement. He would marry Pauline Mullins on December 5th of 1959. Thereafter, Pusser would be elected into office and at age 26 became the youngest sheriff in Tennessee's history. And in growing up in McNairy County, Pusser knew which families ran stills, families that relied on these moonshine stills for their income. But McNairy County is a dry county, so no unauthorized alcohol production, no Tennessee whiskey. So when Buford got elected, busting these stills that he already knew about was kind of a low-hanging fruit. And in doing so, he made a lot of families really mad. And this included the criminal organizations that they supplied with liquor. And at that time, the main organized crime outfit in the area was the State Line Mob, which was a subsidiary of the larger Dixie Mafia. Carl Towhead White was their leader. The organization owned and operated motels and restaurants and clubs along the Mississippi-Tennessee state line. These establishments were centers for every form of vice, bootleg liquor, gambling, prostitution, you name it, they had it. And they reaped hundreds of thousands of dollars from the sale of illegal moonshine and other contraband. And the film Walking Tall and its sequels are specifically based on Pusser's war against the State Line Mob and other local criminal elements. Now, the main speakeasy establishments in the area were the Shamrock Motel, which was owned by Jack and Louise Hathcock, and the White Iris, which was owned by Towhead White. And it's a long and fascinating backstory that is fully detailed in my other video, but in May of 1964, Louise Hathcock would get into a fight, shoot, and kill husband Jack at the Shamrock Motel in what she would characterize as self-defense. After blowing away her husband, she would take on a lover, one Carl Towhead White, the owner of the White Iris. So this essentially combined the two families' criminal efforts. That was until Towhead got pinched and was sent to federal prison. And while he is in the pen, in a controversial confrontation at the Shamrock Motel, it is Louise who is gunned down this time by none other than Sheriff Pusser. The sheriff would be cleared of all wrongdoing, but rumors swirled that he had actually shot her first, then retrieved her gun and fired it back towards his location to bolster his argument of self-defense. But that was never proven, and in the end, Louise Hathcock, the queen of the State Line mob, was dead. This news would enrage lover Towhead White, and as legend has it, he would put a hit out on Sheriff Pusser from federal prison. And after one failed attempt, we arrive at the night Pauline Pusser was thought to have been killed by the State Line mob. As the legend goes, it was believed that 3 men, including one Kirksey McCord Nix Jr., partied into the late hours at the Shamrock Motel. It was in the early morning hours of August 12th that a call was placed to Sheriff Pusser at his home, informing him of some sort of trouble on New Hope Road. As he gets up and prepares to go check it out, his wife Pauline decides that she will tag along. Now it is pitch black when the sheriff and his wife arrive at the scene, and according to Sheriff Pusser, just as he traveled past the New Hope Church, a vehicle sitting there in the dark with 3 men inside pull out from behind the church and pursue the sheriff with their lights turned off. According to Pusser, as he approached a low-water bridge on the road, all of a sudden the headlights flash on and bullets start flying. Glass shatters and the sheriff puts the pedal to the metal as he realizes it's an ambush. After speeding down New Hope Road for a spell and no longer seeing the car behind him, he pulls over to the side of the road to check on his wife, who is slumped down in the seat. As he is discovering that his wife has been shot in the head, the lights flash back on from behind and the assassins unload on the sheriff again. Chief Pusser would be struck in the face, blowing away his lower jaw, and the killers would then speed away. The sheriff would try to call for help on his car radio, but his jaw was so mangled, his garbled pleas for help were unintelligible. Regardless, the dispatcher would say that even though he couldn't make out the words, he knew the sheriff was in trouble. Pusser would be rushed to the hospital in Memphis, where he would stay for 18 days. Doctors would say that he was struck on the left side of his jaw by at least 2, possibly 3 rounds. Buford would undergo 16 surgeries in the following years to repair his face the best that they could. His wife, Pauline, well, she would be laid to rest while Buford lay in a hospital bed. Publicly, Buford Pusser would claim that the ambush was the work of Towhead White, but no one was ever formally charged, and the incident would remain a cold case for decades. But not anymore. Fresh eyes started looking at the file again in 2022, and some very different conclusions have been drawn about that fateful day. Police now say that Sheriff Buford Pusser is believed to have made that whole story up, and that the Tennessee sheriff who inspired the Walking Tall movie was involved in his wife's murder. And not only involved, police say that new evidence suggests that the sheriff likely killed his wife, Pauline Mullins Pusser. Specifically, a Tennessee Bureau of Investigation report uncovered, quote, inconsistencies in Buford Pusser's statements to law enforcement and to others. That's from District Attorney Mark Davidson at a press conference. Law enforcement uncovered physical, medical, forensic, and ballistic evidence that contradicts the McNairy County Sheriff's account of his wife's 1967 murder. Investigators used modern forensic science and investigative techniques that were not available in 1967, officials stated. One piece of evidence was a photo of the vehicle that showed significant blood splattered on the outside of the vehicle, which contradicted Buford Pusser's account of the murder. The crime scene photographs of the interior of the vehicle where she was allegedly killed also did not align with Pusser's account of the assault, and blood spatter analysis indicates that somebody was injured both inside and outside of the vehicle. Investigators now believe that Pauline Pusser was shot outside of the vehicle and then drugged inside of the vehicle, which is not what Buford Pusser had told investigators at the time of the murder. So all of this new information caused Pauline Mullins Pusser's body to be exhumed for an autopsy. And that recent autopsy revealed cranial trauma suffered by Pauline Pusser that does not match accounts of the incident from the sheriff. The autopsy also indicated that prior to her death, she had a nasal fracture that had healed. These are the types of fractures that are most commonly caused by, quote, interpersonal trauma, alluding to a prior violent exchange between her and her husband that is indicative of spousal abuse. A forensic investigator also determined that the gunshot wound to Buford Pusser's cheek was a point-blank wound and not one suffered from a longer range as he had described. They said that this wound was most likely self-inflicted. Investigators now believe that the entire crime scene was staged, that Pauline Pusser was killed outside of the vehicle, and that Sheriff Pusser shot himself to support his story of an ambush. Wow. Quote, Pauline's death was not an accident. It was not an act of chance, but based upon the totality of the investigative file, an act of imminent violence, Davidson would say. If he were alive today, investigators believe that they would have produced enough evidence to establish probable cause and that the prosecutors could have delivered a criminal indictment for murder. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's director, David Roush, said the case was originally based largely upon the sheriff's account and closed, quote, perhaps too soon. Yes, perhaps. Justice for Pauline has been a long time coming, and thanks to all the hard work put in by many, we are finally able to announce to Pauline's surviving family and the public that we believe we are as close to justice as possible, he would say. A Griffin Mullins, who is the brother of Pauline, thanked law enforcement for their work and urged others to accept the findings of the investigation. Quote, to be perfectly honest with you, I am not terribly shocked, he said. I knew deep down there were problems with the marriage. To conclude, for those that don't know, Sheriff Pusser died on August 21st of 1974 of injuries sustained in a one-car automobile accident. Actually, earlier in the day, he had contracted with Bing Crosby Productions in Memphis to portray himself in the sequel to Walking Tall. That evening, after celebrating, he was returning home alone from the McNairy County Fair in his specially modified Corvette. Pusser would lose control of his vehicle, slide across the highway into the other lane, strike an embankment at a high rate of speed, ejecting him from the vehicle. He would break his neck in the accident as the car caught fire and burned. So it came to pass that 7 years after the incident that killed Pauline, Buford Pusser was laid to rest next to her at the Adamsville Cemetery. He was only 36 years old. In the end, Sheriff Pusser was credited with surviving 7 stabbings and 8 shootings. He killed 2 people, now 3, I suppose, and destroyed nearly 100 stills during his lifetime. Ultimately, authorities would say, quote, this case is not about tearing down a legend. It is about giving dignity and closure to Pauline and her family and ensuring that the truth is not buried with time. So that's the episode. Remember to check out the full-length video of Buford Pusser on this channel. That's all I have for you today. Again, my name is Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.